Coming up on today's show, NFC and AFC playoff predictions with 3 weeks left in the NFL regular season. But first, don't be that person who doesn't like the video, because if you don't, your team won't make the playoffs. So hit that thumbs up icon, like the video, and let's get into these predictions. You're watching NFL Daily by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Chase Senior. I hope all of you are getting set to have a great holiday weekend. 3 weeks left in the NFL regular season, and things are tight in the NFC, things are tight in the AFC. That's why football rules and why it's the dominant sport in America, because every single year it is awfully intriguing. Let's first take a look at the NFC playoff picture. Some things have changed after last week in Week 15. The Packers still the number 1 seed in the NFC at 11-3. The Cowboys have jumped the Bucks to move up to number 2 at 10-4. Bucks dropped down to 3. So too do the Cardinals from 3 to 4. Los Angeles Rams are surging, even though that win on Tuesday night against the Seattle Seahawks wasn't all too impressive. The San Francisco 49ers, one of the hottest teams in the National Football League, having won 5 of their last 6. And by the skin of their teeth, the Minnesota Vikings at 7-7. With the Philadelphia Eagles and New Orleans Saints right on their heels with also a 500 record. So we're going to go team by team here for the teams currently in the playoffs, and then we're going to take a look at the predictions for the NFC playoff outlook. Let's first take a look at the remaining schedule for the Green Bay Packers. This weekend against the Cleveland Browns. Then Week 17 against the Minnesota Vikings. Week 18, they wrap up the 2021 regular season against the Detroit Lions. I think by far and away, Green Bay is the best team in the NFL. I think Aaron Rodgers is close to being the front runner for most valuable player, and I think because the Packers are strong on both sides of the ball, they finished the season with 3 consecutive wins for an overall record of 14-3, and they locked down that number 1 seed in the NFC. Home field advantage going through Lambeau Field for the second year in a row. Cowboys' remaining schedule as the number 2 seed. Sunday Night Football against the Washington football team. Washington getting some reinforcements back from the COVID list. Week 17, a very good game against the Arizona Cardinals, which is going to have a lot of playoff implications in terms of seeding on this side of the league. Then they wrap up their regular season schedule, Week 18 against the Philadelphia Eagles, a great rivalry game. And I think because the Cowboys win their next 2 games against Washington, against the Cardinals, they're going to have an opportunity to allow Dak Prescott to rest that calf, and Dak will be able to kind of rejuvenate a little bit because he's been somewhat down coming off that calf injury. Dak and the boys rest. They lose to the Eagles, and does that allow the Eagles to sneak in? Stay tuned to find out. Buccaneers' remaining schedule. Yes, they're without Chris Godwin for the rest of the year. They're not going to have Leonard Fournette for at least the rest of the regular season. They do get Antonio Brown back. We're talking about Tom Brady here. And while Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator for the Saints, has had his number, Tom Brady has had other teams' numbers in the month of December. Buccaneers finished the regular season with 3 consecutive wins. They're able to lock down a really good seed here in the NFC to finish the year at 13-4, and they're, of course, going to be dangerous in the NFC playoffs because they have the GOAT leading the charge. Before we continue in these NFC playoff predictions, AFC coming your way as well later, who will finish as the number 1 seed in the NFC? I think it's going to be Green Bay. If you agree with me, say the Packers. If not, give me another team. Arizona Cardinals really have struggled over the last couple of weeks. Kyler Murray not playing that MVP caliber football since coming off that ankle injury. A tricky schedule to round out the regular season against the Colts, on the road against the Cowboys at Jerry World, and then they wrap up the year against the Seattle Seahawks. And with Russell Wilson, they're always a feisty squad. And I think the Cardinals' struggles do continue. Here's something to monitor, though. They do have the tiebreaker over the Los Angeles Rams because right now they have the better divisional record, even though the Rams just knocked them off a couple weeks ago. I think the Cardinals go 1-2 to end the year, but because they got off to that really hot start that was torrid, they still finished the year at 11-6. Speaking of those Los Angeles Rams, really since that 3-game losing streak several weeks ago, they've been pretty good. Remaining schedule. Tricky game against the Minnesota Vikings, although the Vikings do have some players going on the COVID list as we record this on Thursday. Week 17 at Baltimore. So back-to-back tricky road games. Week 18, they round out the year against the San Francisco 49ers, who they have lost 5 of 6 games to, and Kyle Shanahan has taken down Sean McVay the last 3 matchups. I think the Rams go 1-2 to end the year. Why? Because in Week 17, Baltimore going to be playing for their playoff lives, and I think the Niners going to continue to own that rivalry, which hasn't been much of a rivalry in years past. Rams go 1-2 to end the year. They wrap up the season with an 11-6 record. They're still going to make the playoffs, though. Make sure you subscribe to us here at Chat Sports. We just recently surpassed 272,000 subscribers. Nobody's doing what we're doing because we're all about audience interaction. We push out videos that are creative, informative, entertaining, and we like to interact with all of you. So whatever goes down with the NFL, NBA, college football, and more, we have you covered. So hit that red subscribe button down below. 49ers. Playing awesome football the last 2 months. Winners of 5 of 6. Last 3 games. Thursday night football tonight against the Tennessee Titans. Next week at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara against the Houston Texans. Week 18 against the Los Angeles Rams. I think the Niners, because of how they're playing right now, wrap up the year with 3 straight dubs, and in the process, they end with an 11-6 record, making the NFC West kind of mind-blowing. Minnesota Vikings, on the other hand, Rams in Week 16, Green Bay Packers in Week 17, Chicago Bears in Week 18. Now, because they have some key players out because of COVID against the Rams and because of how the Rams are playing, I think the Rams win this game this upcoming weekend in Week 16. Really tough game against the Packers. They're still going to have something to play for to lock up that number 1 seed with the other teams on their heels, and then they do beat the Chicago Bears in Week 18, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because the Vikings finished this new 17-game schedule with an 8-9 record and taking their place in the final spot in the NFC wildcard, the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the benefit of the easiest schedule in the NFL to wrap up the year. They got the COVID-depleted Washington football team this weekend against the New York Giants, Washington again on the road, and I think the Cowboys are going to rest their players the last week, allowing the Eagles to end the year on a very, very nice pace. So, projected playoffs in the NFC. Packers 1 seed, Bucks 2, Cowboys 3, Cardinals 4 because of that tiebreaker. San Francisco jumps the Rams because they'll own the season series 2-0, and then the Eagles get that 7th and final spot. If you want to bet on any of these matchups that we've talked about on today's show or any of the matchups that we're about to preview coming up in just a few moments, you can do so with our sportsbook partner, BetUS, the best deal that any sportsbook has to offer by far, a 125% deposit bonus. You put down $100 into your account. As you go to chatsports.com/bet, enter the promo code CHAT125, you get $125 back. That's $225 to game with. Coming up next on the docket, projected AFC playoff standings. And honestly, it is going to get wild and wacky in the AFC because all of these teams are closely tied, and they're closely tied right now. Seems to be the case every year in the AFC. Right now, the AFC playoff picture going into Week 16. Chiefs, number 1 seed at 10-4. Patriots at 9-5, number 2. Titans still hanging on at 9-5. Bengals, owners of the AFC North right now at 8-6. Then you have the Colts, Chargers, and the Bills all in the mix in the wild card spots if the season were to end today. But then other teams in the mix. Baltimore at 8-6. Hopefully they get Lamar back soon. Pittsburgh at 7-6-1. Las Vegas Raiders even at 7-7. The red-hot Miami Dolphins, Cleveland, Denver also in the playoff picture in the AFC. It is going to be absolutely insane the final 3 weeks of the regular season, as evidenced by what we're about to talk about here. Chiefs on a roll right now. Their last 3 games. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Denver. All quality opponents, all teams either in the playoffs if the season were to end today or vying for playoff spots. I don't see why the Chiefs are going to trip up. Their offense has started to get it together. Most importantly, though, their defense, which the first month or 2 of the season was historically horrendous, has turned the corner. They've been excellent. I think the Chiefs end the season with 3 straight dubs, 13-4 final record. They get that number 1 seed in the AFC Conference. New England Patriots, on the other hand. A couple weeks ago, I was like, you know what? Bill Belichick, this defense, they're the best team in the AFC, slipping just a bit. Buffalo, Jacksonville, Miami to round out the regular season. I think it's all good in Foxborough and in New England, though. Loss against Buffalo. Buffalo had a bunch of opportunities the other week to win that game in the red zone. Just couldn't put points on the board. I think that changes on the road in Foxborough. Beat the Jags, beat the Dolphins, 11-6 final record. Mac Jones in his first year, able to make the playoffs. So, I think the Chiefs, safe to get that number one seed, in the AFC. Who do you think gets the top seed in the AFC? You let me know and sound off in the comment section. Titans simply haven't been the same team without Derrick Henry, and it's not an easy schedule the next 2 weeks. San Francisco 49ers on a short week, their offensive line depleted, strength for the Niners, defensive line. Miami playing really good football with Tua Tagovailoa leading the charge and Brian Flores' defense, and then they round out the year with a cupcake game against the Houston Texans. I think the Tennessee Titans will lose against the Niners, beat Miami, though, in a little bit of an upset, and also beat the Houston Texans to, by the skin of their teeth, win the AFC South because they did sweep the season series against the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee in Nashville, rocking on Broadway, and the year at 11-6. Cincinnati Bengals, one of the surprise teams of the 2021 NFL season. This is not an easy schedule by any means. Baltimore, whether Lamar or Snoop Huntley plays quarterback, they're so well coached. Kansas City, maybe the hottest team in the NFL. Cleveland will be fighting for their playoff lives the final week of the regular season. And, of course, two of these three rivalry games in the AFC North, with all of these teams having a shot at the division crown. I think Cincinnati going to continue to surprise a lot of people, win against Baltimore, lose against the Chiefs. They beat Cleveland. And is Cleveland going to be packing? You'll see in our projected playoff standings, 10-7, the final record in Joe Burrow's second year. Indianapolis Colts, like the Niners, like some of these other teams that we've talked about, New England, Kansas City, they've really just turned the corner after a sluggish and slow start to the year. And they lead the NFL in turnovers on the defensive side of the ball, which is obviously great. Jonathan Taylor, amongst the leaders in MVP voting, Week 16 against the Cardinals, Raiders and Jaguars to round out the year. I think they lose to the Cardinals. I think they beat the Raiders. They beat the Jags to finish the year at 11-6. As for the Los Angeles Chargers, we'll get to them here in just a bit. But I want to ask you this, and it's somewhat tricky. Getting creative here on the show. That's what we're all about. What team not in the playoff picture, or at least in the playoffs right now, will end up making the playoffs? You let me know. Los Angeles Chargers, they got hot to start the year, went on a little bit of a lull. They were way too conservative with Justin Herbert. Now they've allowed him to be aggressive the last few weeks. It's paid big dividends. He has been letting it rip and lighting it up. Week 16 against the Titans, then the Broncos and Raiders to end the year. I think the Chargers end up winning out. I like the aggressiveness from Brandon Staley. They went toe-for-toe with the Kansas City Chiefs, and if they didn't go for it all the time and just kick field goals, they would have won that game. Wouldn't have even gone to overtime. I think the Chargers are just a good squad, well-rounded bunch. Love their quarterback too. Chargers, 11-6 in 2021. Buffalo Bills, on the other hand, on the road in Foxborough against the New England Patriots. An easy game, or at least it should be, against the Atlanta Falcons and the New York Jets. Now, the last few weeks, it always hasn't resulted in wins for the Buffalo Bills. Shout out Bills Mafia, one of the best fan bases out there. But Buffalo has played pretty good football. Now, I worry about them not being able to run the football. You play in Buffalo, you don't have a running back, you can't run. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but pressure is on Buffalo, and I think they're able to handle that pressure well and wrap up the year with 3 wins against the Pats, Falcons, and Jets. And really, they turn a lot of heads, get into the playoffs as a team that going into the year, a lot of people had pegged as Super Bowl favorites. They'll still have an opportunity to hoist the Lombardi Trophy too, because if they get into the big dance, they'll certainly be interesting. So, in this wild and wacky AFC playoff hunt, here is my projected playoff standings after Week 18 and after 17 games. Chiefs maintain that number 1 seed at 13-4. 2 seed goes to the Patriots at 11-6. Titans hang on. They get the 3 seed, partially because of that divisional record. Cincinnati Bengals end up getting in at 10-7 in the AFC North because they win the division. Chargers get that 5th spot at 11-6. The Bills end up getting in, and also the Indianapolis Colts, by a product of the AFC just being so loaded, at 11-6 on the year, that final spot in the AFC, and they will be extremely dangerous. And I mean extremely dangerous if they get into the playoffs because they play complementary football. Subscribe to Chat Sports. We'll be breaking all this down. Cannot wait to see how the regular season shakes out.